Hey everybody, Steve-O here from Movies and TVs on the Ball. Welcome to part 2 of ranking the 007 James Bond films. On this episode, I'm going to be looking at the Daniel Craig films, which are five films. You had Casino Royale, which brought it back to its kind of original origin story, and it was a little bit more based on the book, and it had uh, Eva Green and Mads Mikkelsen, who played Hannibal, as Sharif, and it really worked really well. And it had and I think it brought Daniel Craig into kind of the first James Bond to really be kind of stripped away of all his gadgets. Then you had Quantum of Solace, which I feel like works pretty well as you watch Casino Royale, you watch Quantum of Solace. It doesn't really, I think if you watch them back to back, it doesn't really kind of connect until you see Spectre, which I'll get to in a second. I really thought it worked pretty well. I mean, we also know that because they had a writer's strike in 2008, the film didn't do as hot as it wanted to do. And then in 2012, Skyfall took over. It was the 50th anniversary of the Bond um, film series, and I think because it was 62 when the film Dr. No came out. And then, and I also liked how Skyfall um, really kind of winked at the audience, or winked, kind of gave people what they wanted. It was you had Harvey Bardem as the bad guy, Silver. They played a lot with the or with sort of what the Bond films needed, and I think it worked really well. And then you had Spectre, which I did a review of, and I did a podcast, which is like one of my first podcasts that's about 10 years old now. And Spectre for me was one of those films that I think, I think really made Quantum of Solace, kind of connected the dots from Quantum of Solace to Casino Royale to Skyfall, and it really worked as sort of the fourth film in the entry. And then and I like Spectre. I think Spectre works really well, and I think Blofeld being played by what's his name, Christoph Waltz, really worked really well. And the fact, I've talked about it before, and how uh, it was sort of connected to, kind of, they winked at it with kind of Austin Powers a little bit. And then No Time to Die, I felt like it was sort of Daniel Craig's final farewell, and it did well enough because I think it worked. It really brought the character into kind of his last hurrah, or Daniel Craig's last hurrah. And the problem, I felt like they tried too hard to make it, make there was a female Bond or female 007 agent, and they tried to make her, didn't give her really any character, but just gave her sort of a of it. She really wasn't interesting enough, but it was pretty good. Remy Malek, who, from Mr. Robot, and of course from his Best Picture, Bohemian Rhapsody Oscar. I liked him as a villain. I thought he worked really well. I think that, the Daniel Craig Bond villains kind of have a really interesting way. I think the one that probably had the least amount of pizzazz was probably from Quantum of Solace. But Mads Mikkelsen as the Sharif really worked really well, and I think he brought something to it, especially the card game and Casino Royale, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. I think really sort of is the one that probably stands out. But if you think about it, it started. I like how it started with Bond and it ended or started with Daniel Craig, sort of origin of Bond, and then it ended with his death, which I kind of from his birth to his death, which I think works really well, and plus the fact that the 25th James Bond film is named No Time to Die, and the first James Bond film is called Doctor No. I think it worked really well, and I think the um, characters work really well. Quantum of Solace, I think Spectre really gave Quantum of Solace a kind of really edged it into what it needed to be, and I think that um, No Time to Die was a nice farewell. So that's kind of my real quick look at Casino Royale, just the James Bond films, the Daniel Craig James Bond films in general. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. And as always, like and subscribe and and also and rank them as well in the comments. I probably would say Casino Royale is probably the first one. Skyfall is probably the second. Spectre is probably the third. No Time to Die might be the fourth, and Quantum of Solace would probably be the fifth. But I want to know your thoughts. So as always, I'm Steve, and see you at the movies. Peace.